The firing range smelled of burned powder and cold steel. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale, unforgiving glow across the concrete lanes. A line of soldiers stood behind the safety barrier, pretending not to stare. No one spoke loudly. They never did when someone was about to be judged. Staff Sergeant Mara Hale stepped into Lane 7 and felt the weight of eyes on her back. Not curiosity, not respect. Something heavier. Doubt. A quiet voice drifted from somewhere behind her. She already blew it once. Another followed, lower, sharper. Shouldn't even be holding a sniper rifle anymore. Mara didn't turn. She didn't react. She adjusted the sling on her shoulder and knelt, slow and deliberate. The rifle felt familiar in her hands. Solid. Honest. A range technician glanced down at his tablet. Shooter ready. Mara slid into prone. Elbows planted. Stock tight against her shoulder. Her cheek rested against the cold polymer. The world narrowed. Breathing slowed. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Her heartbeat thudded steady in her ears. Somewhere behind the glass, a digital timer began to count down. Sweat formed along her temple and slid toward her jawline. Her finger took up slack on the trigger. Not rushed. Not forced. Settled. The rifle cracked. Sharp. Clean. Controlled. The target jerked. A perfect hole bloomed dead center. No one spoke. Not a cough. Not a shuffle. The ventilation fans seemed suddenly too loud. The range officer leaned forward, studying the monitor. Then he straightened. Center mass. Clean hit. A captain stepped into view, eyes still on the screen. Staff Sergeant Hale is reinstated as sniper qualified. A murmur rippled, then died just as fast. The captain turned toward Mara. His voice was calm, almost gentle. One more hesitation in combat, and you're done. Mara nodded once. No argument. No relief. Just acceptance. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to FOB Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? 14 years earlier, rain hammered against a chipped wooden porch on the east side of Bakersfield. Mara Hale stood barefoot in the doorway, a thin backpack hanging from one shoulder, water dripping from the ends of her hair onto the warped boards below. Rick Hale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He tossed the backpack at her feet like it weighed nothing. Don't come back. The words landed flat. Final. Mara looked past him. Her mother stood in the kitchen, arms folded, eyes fixed on the counter. Not angry. Not crying. Just absent. Rick reached forward. The door slammed. The deadbolt slid home. Then the chain. Each sound fell louder than the rain. Mara didn't knock. She didn't scream. She stood there long enough for the truth to settle. Nobody inside was coming for her. She checked her pockets. $40. No phone. No jacket thick enough for the night. No place to go. She started walking. Streetlights blurred through the rain. Houses passed like shapes without meaning. Every step carried her farther from anything that had ever pretended to be home. By midnight, she found a 24-hour laundromat on 5th Street. Warm air rolled out each time the door opened. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Rows of machines rattled and clanked. Near the back wall, a homeless man slept on 2 plastic chairs pushed together. His boots were off. His socks were wet. He opened one eye when Mara sat down across from him. They looked at each other for a moment. No greeting. No questions. Just recognition. Mara understood it without words. She had crossed a line. She was invisible now. The first week became a pattern. Laundromat at night. Bus station benches until security chased her off. Public library during the day to stay warm and quiet. Hunger followed her everywhere. It lived in her stomach, in her head, in her dreams. On the 5th day, she stood behind a fast food restaurant and watched employees take smoke breaks. A woman in a stained manager's shirt noticed her. "What are you doing back there?" Mara swallowed. "Looking for work." The woman studied her face, her clothes, her shoes. "My name's Linda," she said. "You wash dishes. I pay cash." "You don't ask questions." "I don't ask questions." Mara nodded. That was the deal. She worked nights. Scrubbing grease, emptying trash, sweeping floors long after customers were gone. When food was about to be thrown away, Linda slid a wrapped burger into a paper bag and left it near the sink. Mara never said thank you, not because she wasn't grateful, because gratitude felt dangerous. She ate in the alley behind the building, sitting on an overturned milk crate. Cold burgers tasted like victory. She learned quickly. Keep your head down. Watch hands, not faces. Notice who lingers. Notice who circles. Silence kept her safer than attitude. One night, 3 older teenagers stepped out of an alley and blocked her path. They looked her up and down. One smiled. "Backpack." Mara stopped walking. She didn't reach for the knife in her jacket pocket. Not yet. Her right hand rested inside the fabric. Her eyes lifted. Flat. Unblinking. No begging. No fear. Just calculation. The tallest boy hesitated. He saw something he hadn't expected. They muttered insults, then stepped aside. Mara walked past them. 2 blocks later, she ducked behind a dumpster and vomited. Her hands shook, but something else lived beneath the shaking. A strange clarity. Fear didn't own her. It focused her. Winter pushed her out of doorways and bus stations. She found an abandoned factory near the rail yard. Broken windows. Peeling paint. Stale air that smelled like rust. One night, footsteps followed her inside. A man's silhouette filled the hallway. He smiled. Mara stopped walking. Pulled the folding knife from her pocket. The blade snapped open. "I'll cut you," she said. Her voice didn't waver. The man stared at her eyes, then at the knife, then slowly stepped backward. When he disappeared, Mara slid down the wall and stayed there until morning. Luck runs out. The thought burned into her. She needed more than survival. She needed an exit. One Saturday morning, distant gunshots echoed from outside town. Not street gunfire. Rhythmic, controlled. Mara followed the sound on foot. A small outdoor shooting range sat beyond a chain-link fence. Men stood at benches firing slow, deliberate shots. An older man with gray hair and a weathered face watched her from behind the counter. "You lost?" he asked. "No." He studied her a second longer, then reached into a paper bag and slid it across. "Ham sandwich." "Wife packs too much." Mara hesitated. Took it. Ate like she hadn't eaten in weeks. "My name's Frank," he said. "I was a Marine. 26 years. Mara didn't ask anything. She just watched. The way shooters breathed. The way Frank corrected posture. The way stillness mattered more than strength. "You want to learn?" Frank asked. Mara nodded. Saturday mornings became routine. No yelling. No rush. Breathing drills. Stillness drills. Watching leaves move in the wind. Noticing small things. Weeks later, Frank placed a rifle on the bench. Mara's first shot missed. Her second was closer. Her third punched the center ring. Frank nodded once. "You don't shoot with your hands," he said. "You shoot with your mind." Something inside Mara clicked. Not excitement. Not joy. Recognition. For the first time since the door had slammed behind her, Mara saw a future shape itself. Not comfort. Not safety. Purpose. A quiet, dangerous kind of purpose. The kind that doesn't ask permission to exist. Mara forged her age the way she learned to do everything else in those years. Quietly. carefully, with no room for mistakes. At 17, she walked into a recruiting station with a borrowed smile, steady hands, and paperwork that said she belonged. The sergeant behind the desk asked routine questions. Mara answered like she had rehearsed them 100 times, because she had. When she raised her right hand, the oath felt less like a promise and more like a door finally opening. Basic training hit her like a wall of sound. Boots on concrete. Voices echoing through cinder-block halls. The constant urgency of a world where hesitation was treated like weakness. Mara was short, thin, and quiet, the kind of soldier people judged before she ever spoke. In the barracks, the first laughter found her fast. Private Kyle Denton made sure of it. He leaned against a locker, grinning like he owned the room, and nodded toward her boots. "Where'd they pick you up?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "A bus station?" A few chuckles spread like a small fire. Mara didn't answer. Denton stepped closer. "I can smell it on you," he said. "Homeless trash. You'll wash out by week 2. More laughter. Then silence, waiting for her to react. Mara stared straight ahead, face still, like she hadn't heard a word. But inside, something tightened. Not anger, not fear. A decision. She didn't fight back because she'd learned the streets already. If you swing, you become entertainment. If you flinch, you become prey. So she did what she always did. She worked. She pushed harder on runs. She carried more weight on rucks. She took the worst jobs without complaint. When others collapsed onto their bunks, Mara stayed up rolling her socks and cleaning her weapon like it was sacred. The days turned into tests layered on tests, the kind designed to strip away anyone pretending. Denton kept trying. Little comments and chow lines. A shoulder bump in hallways. A laugh whenever she struggled with anything new. Mara never gave him what he wanted. She never quit. On the first long ruck march, the line stretched through humid Georgia woods, boots grinding into dirt, sweat-soaking uniforms. Soldiers started falling behind. Someone cursed. Someone begged for a water break. Mara kept moving. One step. Then another. Then another. Her shoulders burned, and her lungs felt like they were filled with sand, but she didn't slow. Near the end, only a handful were still upright. Mara was still there. Denton looked back, shocked, his mouth half open like he'd swallowed his own joke. Sergeant First Class Luis Navarro noticed that look. Navarro didn't speak much. He didn't throw insults. He watched. That was his habit. On the live fire range, Navarro stood behind the firing line while recruits tried to control adrenaline and noise. Shots cracked, some clean, many sloppy. Targets looked like they'd been chewed by wild animals. Mara's lane was different. Her grouping was tight. Not perfect, but disciplined. Navarro leaned forward, eyes narrowing. He didn't praise her. He didn't smile. He just memorized what he saw. After the range, he caught her near the ammo shed. "Hail," he said. Mara stopped. "Yes, Sergeant First Class." Navarro studied her face a moment longer than comfort allowed. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Mara kept her voice even. "Practice, Sergeant First Class." Navarro nodded as if he'd expected that answer. "Meet me after chow tomorrow. Extra marksmanship." Mara didn't show surprise. But her pulse jumped anyway. The next weeks became a second life layered on top of the first. Early mornings with Navarro, who corrected small details that most people never noticed. Breathing. Trigger press. Body alignment. The pause between heartbeat and shot. He spoke in short sentences and let silence do the teaching. At night, Mara studied every requirement she could find. Sniper track. Selection standards. Physical scores. Fieldcraft basics. She read until her eyes blurred because reading was something the streets had taught her too. Knowledge was warmth. Knowledge was safety. Knowledge was a weapon no one could take away. Denton saw her staying late and tried a new angle. One night, he leaned in close and lowered his voice. "You think being quiet makes you tough," he said. "It doesn't. It just makes you weird." Mara looked at him, expression flat. Then she turned away like he was air. Would you have stayed quiet in that moment, or would you have given him the fight he wanted? Mara chose silence, because silence kept her moving forward. When the chance came, she applied. Paperwork, screenings, scores, interviews. The day the slot was approved, Navarro handed her the notice without ceremony. "Don't waste it," he said. Mara didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. Her eyes already did. Sniper school was nothing like the movies. No glory, no heroic music. Just exhaustion, discomfort, and the slow grinding pressure of being tested in ways that felt personal. Master Sergeant Paul Keegan was the lead instructor. A hard man with calm eyes, like he'd already seen everything a student could pretend to be. On the first morning, he stood in front of the class and let the silence stretch until it hurt. "Some of you came here because you want to be dangerous," he said. He paused. "Some of you came here because you want to be respected." Another pause. "Here's the truth. You will stare at someone long enough to see pores, and when the moment comes, your decision will rewrite somebody else's life." Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered. Keegan let those words settle like cold weight. The course broke people in small, quiet ways. Sleep deprivation. Long hours in the prone. Observation drills that made your eyes ache. Stalk lanes where one mistake meant failure. Students began to unravel. Not from pain, from the mental strain of being forced to become still. Corporal Alex Torres was decorated infantry, confident, loud, and sure he belonged. The first time they ran a human silhouette scenario, Torres froze. Not because he couldn't aim, because he could. He lowered the rifle, breathing fast, eyes wide. "I can't," he muttered. "I can't do it." He quit that afternoon. He packed his gear and left without looking at anyone. Mara watched him go and felt something heavy in her chest. Not judgment. Understanding. Then she turned back to the training lane and did the next drill. For Mara, it didn't feel like courage. It felt like math. Distance. Wind. Angle. Time. She didn't deny the weight of it, but she refused to let it take control in the moment. Keegan noticed. Not with praise, with a slight shift of attention. A longer stare. A quiet note written on a clipboard. Mara passed. She graduated. She earned the place in the infantry battalion sniper section, the kind of assignment people bragged about. Mara didn't brag. She just folded into the unit like she'd been there all along. Deployment orders came soon after. Afghanistan. Heat. Dust. A sky that felt too wide. In the early missions, Mara was clean. Patient overwatch. Controlled shots when needed. No mistakes. No panic. Her spotter trusted her, and the platoon began to trust her too. Not because she talked, because she delivered. Her name started to move quietly through the battalion, not fame, not legend, just professional confidence. Then came Kandahar, a rooftop overwatch position over a narrow street. The kind of place where everything looks still until it isn't. Mara lay behind the rifle, breathing slow, eyes scanning. The target appeared like a sudden answer. Clear line. Clear authorization. Wind steady. Distance known. Mara's fingers settled. Then the man turned his head. For half a second, Mara didn't see geometry. She saw a face. Young. Sweat on his brow. A moment of human detail that didn't belong inside a scope. And in that half second, everything changed. A blast echoed from down the street, sharp and chaotic. Friendly shouting. A soldier went down. The sound of pain is different from every other sound. It hits the body like a physical thing. Mara's hands stayed steady, but her mind snapped. Not fear. Guilt. The moment she should have been a weapon, she'd been a person. After the mission, the after-action review room felt colder than the roof had. A projector hummed. Maps on the wall, dust still on uniforms. Captain Ryan Mercer didn't yell. That was the worst part. He stood in front of the room, voice calm, like the facts were heavier than anger. "Hale," he said. Mara stood. Mercer's eyes didn't blink. "You had the shot." Mara swallowed. "Yes, sir." Mercer nodded once. "And you hesitated." Silence filled the room. Mara felt every soldier listening, not mocking this time, but judging. Mercer continued, voice steady. "That hesitation nearly killed one of my men." It did get one wounded. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult her. He simply removed the rifle from her identity with a sentence. "You're off the sniper slot until you prove you can do the job without freezing." Mara nodded, but her world tilted anyway. She was reassigned as a regular rifleman. Same uniform. Same flag. Different role. And it felt like losing the only place she'd ever truly belonged. She trained harder. Ran longer. Dry-fired until her finger went numb. But the mental block remained like a shadow. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that face. Not the threat. The humanity. One night, she wandered into the base chapel because it was the only place on earth that asked nothing from her. No shouting. No judgment. Just quiet. She sat in the back row, staring at the floor. Sergeant First Class Ben Carter found her there. He didn't preach. He didn't ask what she believed. He sat beside her like an older brother who'd already fought the same war inside his head. "You're carrying it in the wrong place," Carter said. Mara's voice came out rough. "I failed." Carter shook his head slightly. "You hesitated. That's not the end. But you don't get to hesitate out there." Mara stared forward. Carter's tone stayed calm. "In the field, you're a weapon," he said. "Afterward, you're human." Those words sank deep. Not permission to be cold. A rule for survival. A way to keep lives from slipping through your fingers because your heart showed up at the wrong second. The retest came fast. A brutal simulation lane filled with smoke and noise, flashes, shouting. A countdown clock screaming urgency. Mara lay prone, the world chaotic around her. She breathed. In, out. She forced her mind to see shapes, not faces. Angles, not stories. The target appeared. Mara pressed the trigger. Perfect hit. The range went quiet. Mercer watched the monitor for a long moment. Then he turned to her. "You're reinstated," he said, his voice softened by only an inch. "Don't make me say this again. One more hesitation in combat, and you're done." Mara nodded once. Not proud, not relieved. Just steady. Because she understood the truth now. She could be human later. But in the moment, lives depended on her. She had to be something else entirely. 3 years passed without ceremony. No headlines. No medals. No speeches. Just deployments. Long flights. Dusty boots. Rifles cleaned in silence. Somewhere along the way, Mara Hale picked up another stripe. Staff Sergeant. The rank sat naturally on her shoulders, like it had been waiting for her. Inside her battalion, people didn't talk about her much. They didn't need to. When patrols meet at Overwatch, her name moved quietly through the platoon offices. Get Hale. When commanders wanted a problem handled clean, they asked the sniper section for one person. Hale. Not because she was loud, not because she bragged, because she never missed. You wouldn't notice her in a chow line. She ate fast, sat alone or with one other soldier, listened more than she spoke. But in the field, something about her presence changed the air. Calmer, sharper. Like danger had already been measured and filed away. Nobody knew where she came from. Nobody knew about the porch, the rain, the laundromat, the knife. Frank Mercer. Kandahar stayed buried in paperwork and memory. All anyone saw now was results. One morning, a runner handed Mara sealed orders. Temporary duty. Destination, Virginia. No details, no explanation. Just a time and a place. The building was plain. No signs, no flags out front. Inside, hallways smelled faintly of coffee and printer toner. A civilian with no name badge escorted Mara into a small conference room. 3 people waited. A tall man in desert camouflage with a Navy trident on his chest. Commander Nathan Wolfe. Next to him, a man in a suit who looked more military than most soldiers. CIA Operations Officer Daniel Reed. In the corner, a third chair sat empty, pushed slightly back, as if whoever normally occupied it didn't care to be seen. Wolfe gestured. "Have a seat, Staff Sergeant," Mara said. Wolfe didn't smile. He didn't waste words. "We're assembling an Overwatch option for a direct action capture mission," he said. Reed slid a folder across the table. Inside were satellite images, building schematics, streets marked in red. "Urban environment," Reed said. "Tight angles, limited access," Wolfe continued. "No spotter." Mara didn't blink. No dedicated QRF. Mara's expression didn't change. Reed leaned forward. "If something goes wrong, we don't extract you. Our priority is the ground team and the asset." Silence filled the room. Most soldiers would have asked a question. Most would have asked about contingencies. Mara simply nodded. Wolfe watched her closely. "You'd insert alone," he said. "Build your own hide. Establish your own exfil route if possible. You'll be on a rooftop position with line of sight over the breach and primary escape corridor." Reed tapped one of the images. "You'll be working in close proximity to friendlies. Your shots will be near friendly. Misses aren't acceptable." Mara kept her hands folded in her lap. "Yes, sir." Wolfe studied her face, not her rank, not her ribbon stack, her eyes. Reed flipped open another folder. "Staff Sergeant Hale was recommended by multiple battalion-level commanders," he said. "Consistent performance, no disciplinary issues. Exceptional stress tolerance." He paused. "She's also done this kind of isolation before." The words landed lightly, but they carried weight. Mara didn't react. Wolfe reached into his own folder, pulled out a thinner packet. One page stuck out slightly from the rest. He didn't hide what he was reading. Kandahar. After-action review. Medical casualty report. Wolfe stared at the page longer than necessary, long enough for Mara to notice. Long enough for Reed to notice. Wolfe finally looked up. "Your record since then is clean," Wolfe said. Mara said nothing. Wolfe leaned back in his chair. "Let me ask you something, Staff Sergeant." Mara met his eyes. "Yes, sir." Wolfe's voice stayed even. "You hesitate anymore?" The room felt smaller. Not tense. Focused. Mara didn't rush her answer. She didn't say it loudly. She didn't say it dramatically. "No, sir." Wolfe held her gaze for another second, then nodded once. Reed closed the folder. "The mission window is 72 hours, he said. "If you accept, you'll start movement tonight." Mara didn't ask for time. "I accept." No bravado, no heroics. Just a statement of fact. The empty chair in the corner scraped softly as someone unseen shifted their weight, then went still again. Wolfe stood. "So we're clear," he said. "You won't get credit. You won't get a citation. If this goes bad, officially you were never there." Mara rose to her feet. "Yes, sir." Wolfe extended his hand. Mara shook it. Firm. Controlled. As she turned to leave, Reed spoke one last time. "Staff Sergeant Hale." Mara stopped. Reed looked at her with something that wasn't quite sympathy. Not quite respect either. closer to understanding. "You are aware no one can save you if this goes wrong?" Mara nodded. "Yes, sir." She walked out of the room the same way she'd walked in. Quiet, steady, carrying a mission that would never exist on paper. What would you have done, knowing no one could save you if it went wrong? Mara inserted alone under a sky that didn't care who lived through the night. A transport dropped her far from the city center, and the last friendly voice she heard was a clipped confirmation in her earpiece, then nothing but wind and distance. She moved with a small pack, a rifle broken down and wrapped tight, and the kind of calm that didn't come from confidence. It came from repetition. From knowing that panic wasted oxygen. From learning, a long time ago, that no one was coming if she made a mistake. The city smelled like damp concrete and diesel. Narrow alleys funneled sound in strange ways. Somewhere a dog barked once, then went quiet. Mara counted steps, tracked shadows, and kept her face down when lights passed. She became what she had always been good at becoming: invisible. The building was older than the maps suggested, with chipped brick and a rooftop access stairwell that creaked when she tested it. She didn't force it. She waited, listening for movement. Nothing. She slipped inside and climbed. Every step was a decision. Every pause was intentional. At the roof door, she stopped again, breath held, ear pressed close. A faint hum of city life. Far traffic. No footsteps. She eased the door open just enough to slide through, then pulled it shut behind her. The rooftop was cluttered with old antenna mounts, a rusted water tank, and scattered debris that had collected in corners like the building's forgotten history. Mara moved to the far side and lay flat behind a low wall, letting her eyes adjust. She didn't rush to build the hide. She watched first. Patterns, light cycles, windows that opened and closed, stairwell doors on nearby roofs. The rhythm of people who didn't know a war was about to pass through their neighborhood. Then she built. A small nest of shadow and broken material. A shallow depression behind a parapet. A cloth layer to dull any shine. A firing lane cut through clutter so cleanly it looked accidental. The rifle came together in quiet pieces, like a ritual. Suppressor tightened. Optic checked. Dope card taped inside her wrist. She tested the comms once. 2 short clicks. Pike's voice came back low and steady. "Overwatch, confirm position." "Set," Mara replied. No call sign. No name. Just a job. Hours passed. Stillness became its own kind of pain. Her legs went numb. Her shoulders tightened. A small itch formed under her collar and begged to be scratched. Mara ignored it. The body could complain all it wanted. The mind stayed on task. She watched the street below through glass and shadows. She watched a man carry groceries. A woman step out for a cigarette. A kid kick a ball against a wall. Then, slowly, the street emptied like the city itself had sensed the change coming. Pike's voice returned. "Team moving." Mara adjusted her optic and found them. 6 seals sliding through a narrow side road, dark shapes moving with the practiced silence of men who'd trained their whole lives to be unseen. They didn't hurry. They didn't waste motion. They looked less like soldiers and more like something built for precision. Wolf's voice cut in, calm as a weather report. "Breach in 30. Mara tracked the target building. 2 floors. Balcony railings. A doorway marked on her map. No civilians visible. No movement in windows. Her breath stayed slow. In, out, in, out. The breach hit like a sudden flash of violence in a quiet world. A muted pop. A door kicked inward. The seals flowed inside. Mara's world narrowed to windows and angles. She watched for armed silhouettes. For heat signatures. For any sign of a counter-move. Seconds stretched. Then Pike's voice again, tighter now. Package secured. Mara felt her heartbeat change. Not faster. Heavier. This was the moment missions broke open. Extraction began. The SEALs poured back out, tight formation, a seventh figure between them with a hood over his head and hands bound. They moved toward the escape corridor. A clean exit. A quiet finish. Then the city answered. Headlights flared at the far end of the street. One vehicle. Then another. Then another. Engines roared as if the drivers had been waiting for permission. Doors flew open. Men spilled out with rifles and frantic movement, shouting over each other. Mara counted without thinking. 15. Then more. At least 20. They weren't trained. But they had numbers, and they were moving to cut off the team. An ambush. Fast. Aggressive. Designed to trap. Pike's voice snapped. Contact front. Wolf didn't shout. Move! Move! Mara's fingers settled. She didn't wait for permission. She did the math. Led vehicle first. Driver. If the vehicle stopped, it would block the lane and slow the rest. She tracked the windshield. Saw the driver's hands flash on the wheel. She exhaled. The rifle coughed. The driver's head snapped back and the vehicle lurched, rolling forward a few feet before crashing into a curb and stalling sideways. The street narrowed instantly. The second vehicle tried to swing around. Mara shifted. A man leaned out with a radio, yelling into it, eyes wild. She put the reticle on his chest. Pressed. He dropped out of sight. Radio clattered on the pavement, still chirping. Below, the SEALs moved into cover as rounds snapped overhead. Concrete chipped. Windows shattered. Mara didn't hear the fight the way the men below heard it. From her rooftop, it was geometry. Lines of fire. Angles. Timing. She picked targets that changed the outcome, not just bodies. A man coordinating with hand signals. A shooter setting up behind a car door. Another radio operator trying to call reinforcements. One by one, the threat thinned. But the ambush didn't collapse. More hostiles poured into the street, using sheer momentum to press closer. The SEALs were pinned behind a low wall and a wrecked vehicle. The package was crouched between two operators, shaking. Pike's breathing filled the comms. Controlled, but heavy. Overwatch were boxed. Mara scanned faster. She searched for the brain, not the fists. Then she saw him. The commander, not by uniform. By behavior. He stayed behind cover, just enough exposure to see, just enough distance to direct. He pointed. Men moved. He spoke into a handheld radio, calm in the chaos. If he dropped, the ambush would lose its spine. Mara adjusted her aim. Then Kowalski moved. He broke from cover to drag a teammate back. He did it without hesitation, the way trained men do when loyalty outweighs fear. But his movement put him directly into Mara's sight picture. For a fraction of a second, Mara's scope held two truths at once. Kowalski in the foreground, the commander behind him. A narrow channel of air between them. An impossible shot. 18 inches of margin, maybe less. Wind pushing slightly left. Distance stable. Time shrinking. Pike's voice cracked. Kowalski, get down. But Kowalski didn't. He was exposed. The commander raised his weapon, angling toward the SEALs, ready to finish it. Mara's mind flashed back to Kandahar. A face in the scope. A half-second delay. A friend bleeding. The old failure tried to rise like a wave. Mara crushed it. Not by becoming cold, by becoming precise. Her voice slid into the comms so quiet it almost sounded like the wind. Kowalski. Freeze. It wasn't a request. It was a command shaped by certainty. Kowalski heard it. And did the one thing that proved he belonged on that team. He trusted the unseen voice above him. He stopped moving. Went still. Mid-step, he became a statue in a kill zone. For one long second, the entire network of men listening went silent. Even the gunfire felt distant. Everyone understood what was happening. They understood what she was about to attempt. Mara slowed her breathing. In. Out. Her heart thudded once. She waited for the tiny lull between beats. The reticle rested on the narrow pocket of space beside Kowalski's head. The commander behind him shifted just slightly, exposing more of his torso. Mara pressed the trigger. The rifle coughed. The bullet cut through the air like a decision made final. It passed inches from Kowalski's temple, so close that if he had flinched, it would have ended him. Instead, the round struck the commander's center mass. The man folded backward and vanished behind cover. The effect was immediate, like cutting a wire. The hostile line faltered. Shouts turned confused. Men looked around, suddenly uncertain. A few fired blindly. Then they started moving backward, not forward. The ambush lost its rhythm, lost its confidence. Wolf's voice came through, sharp and controlled. Push. Go. The SEALs surged forward, dragging the package with them. They moved as one unit, leaving the kill zone before it could rebuild itself. Mara kept firing when needed, not chasing bodies, just preventing the ambush from reorganizing. A final vehicle tried to block the street. She disabled it. A man with a radio tried to rally the rest. She dropped him. Then the street emptied the way it had earlier, only now it was littered with wreckage and silence. The SEALs vanished into the dark. The comms stayed quiet, no cheers. No laughter, no celebration. Just breathing, hard and steady. The kind you hear after people survive something they weren't sure they would survive. Mara stayed on her rifle for another full minute, watching for a second wave that never came. Finally, Pike's voice returned, low and strained with disbelief. "Who the hell are you?" Mara didn't look away from the street. She didn't smile. She didn't claim anything. She answered with one word, calm as a heartbeat. Overwatch. The debrief room was small, windowless, and deliberately forgettable. Plain table, plain walls. A single screen mounted to the front, the kind of place built for things that were never meant to exist. Mara sat at one end of the table, hands folded, posture neutral. Across from her sat Commander Wolf. Beside him, Daniel Reed flipped through a thin folder. No one looked relaxed. No one pretended this had been routine. Reed cleared his throat. "Timeline reconstruction is complete," he said. He didn't look at Mara yet. 11 hostile combatants engaged and neutralized. The words hung in the air. 0 friendly casualties. Wolf's jaw tightened slightly. Reed clicked a remote. Still images appeared on the screen. Thermal shots. Street angles. Freeze frames of muzzle flashes from Mara's position. Reed continued. Target asset confirmed in custody. Information extracted within 2 hours of capture. He turned a page. Preliminary analysis indicates the intelligence has already disrupted at least 3 planned attacks. Nobody reacted, not because it wasn't impressive, but because this room wasn't built for praise. Reed finally looked up. "There will be no official record of this operation." Mara nodded. "No awards." Another nod. "No citations." She had expected nothing else. Reed closed the folder. "That is all." Silence settled over the room, thick and heavy. Commander Wolf did not sit back. He did not speak immediately. He slowly pushed his chair away from the table and stood. The movement drew every eye. Wolf turned until he was facing Mara directly. Not the staff sergeant, not the Overwatch asset. The person. "You hesitated once in Kandahar," Wolf said. The words landed like a hammer. The room stiffened. Even Reed glanced sideways. Mara felt the old weight rise in her chest. The moment. The face. The explosion. For half a second, she was certain this was the end. That this was the part where everything she had built quietly collapsed. Wolf didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. You learned, he continued. You adapted. A pause. That's what real snipers do. Mara looked up. Wolf brought his hand up in a sharp, crisp salute. Not ceremonial. Not public. Personal. The kind of salute given only when one professional recognizes another. No one in the room moved. The air felt compressed. Then Chief Petty Officer Pike stepped forward. He looked uncomfortable, like a man who didn't care much for speaking in rooms like this. She saved our lives, Pike said. He didn't elaborate. He didn't dramatize. He didn't describe the shot. He didn't need to. The sentence was enough. No one spoke after that. Not Wolf. Not Reed. Not Mara. Silence filled the room. Not awkward. Not empty. Heavy with something rare. Recognition. The kind that never shows up on paper. The kind that only exists between people who were there. The silence didn't break. It deepened. Slowly, one chair scraped back from the table. Then another. Then another. Not in unison. Not on command. Men stood because something inside them told them to. Commander Wolf remained at attention, his salute still raised. Daniel Reed rose from his seat, uncertain for half a second, then straightened his posture. Pike stood. The other operators in the room stood. No one spoke. No one looked around to see who else was doing it. The movement spread naturally, like a quiet agreement. Mara realized what was happening only after everyone else was already on their feet. She stayed seated. Not out of disrespect, out of instinct. This kind of moment had never belonged to her. Wolf lowered his hand slowly. Then, without prompting, Pike raised his own hand in salute. Not flashy. Not sharp. Just clean. One by one, others followed. Quiet salutes. Different styles. Different habits. Same meaning. No cheering. No clapping. No congratulations. No speeches about bravery or sacrifice. Those words were for ceremonies. This wasn't a ceremony. This was professional recognition. The highest kind. Mara stood. She didn't return the salutes right away. She didn't know how. She had spent most of her life being ignored, or dismissed, or told she didn't belong. Now a room full of people who had survived because of her were standing in silence. It felt heavier than gunfire. Wolf dropped his salute first. Others followed. The room settled back into stillness, but something had shifted permanently. Chief Petty Officer Kowalski stepped forward. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a tired man who had come very close to dying. There was still dust on his boots. A faint smear of dried blood on his sleeve that wasn't his. He stopped in front of Mara. Extended his hand. Mara looked at it for a moment before taking it. His grip was firm, honest. "You told me to freeze," Kowalski said. His voice stayed steady, but his eyes gave him away. "I trusted you." Mara nodded once. She didn't say you're welcome. She didn't say I knew I wouldn't miss. She didn't say anything. There was nothing useful to add. Trust had been given. Trust had been honored. That was enough. Kowalski released her hand and stepped back. Wolf turned slightly, shifting from commander to recruiter without changing tone. "Special Operations Command has been tracking you for a while, Staff Sergeant Hale." Mara listened. No reaction. "We're standing up a small unit operating in the gray space between military and intelligence." He chose his words carefully. Independent operators. Precision assets. People who can work alone, build their own picture, and carry the weight without breaking. Reed nodded. "No uniforms tied to the mission," Reed added. "No patches. No public acknowledgement." Wolf met Mara's eyes. "It's voluntary." Mara didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." Wolf allowed himself the smallest nod. "Good." He paused. Then said the words that sealed the moment. "Welcome to the shadows." No applause followed. No handshake line formed. The room didn't erupt into motion. People simply went back to their seats, one by one, like professionals returning to work. But nothing felt the same anymore. Mara sat down slowly, not lighter, not happier, different. She hadn't earned fame. She hadn't earned forgiveness from herself. But she had earned something rarer, a place among people who understood exactly what she was. Not a symbol, not a legend. A weapon when needed, a human afterward. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like something the world had thrown away. She felt placed, where she belonged. Mara Hale did not become famous. There were no articles, no interviews, no photographs. She went back to work. One mission became another. Another became many. Different countries, different rooftops, different streets that all smelled like dust, oil, and tension. Sometimes she worked with SEALs. Sometimes with soldiers who never learned her real role. Sometimes completely alone. Her call sign began to drift quietly through certain circles. Ghost line. Not spoken loudly. Not written down. Whispered between professionals when a problem required absolute precision and absolute calm. She's good. She doesn't miss. That's Ghost line's lane. Mara never corrected anyone. She never expanded the story. She showed up. She did the job. She left. Years passed that way. Measured not by birthdays or holidays, but by deployments and recovery windows. By rifles cleaned in silence. By flights taken at night. By memories stacked neatly in places she rarely opened. On one rare stretch of leave, Mara drove back to Bakersfield. Not out of nostalgia. Not out of anger. Because something unfinished had followed her for a long time. The old house sat at the end of the same street. Paint peeling, weeds crawling up the porch steps. Windows dark. No cars in the driveway. No sign of life. Mara parked across the street and sat in her vehicle for a long moment. She didn't feel rage. She didn't feel grief. Just distance, like looking at a photograph from someone else's life. She drove next to the edge of town where the small shooting range had once stood. The gate was locked. The sign was gone. Weeds pushed through cracked pavement. Mara stepped out of the truck and stood there, confused by how much the place still existed in her memory. A man walking his dog stopped nearby. "You looking for the old range?" he asked. Mara nodded. "Closed a few years back," the man said. "Owner passed. Heart attack, I think." Mara didn't ask for a name. She already knew. She drove to a grocery store and bought a small bundle of flowers, nothing fancy. She returned to the locked gate and laid them gently against the fence. For a long time, she stood alone in the parking lot. Wind moved through dry weeds. Traffic hummed in the distance. Mara looked at the empty space where a counter and a bench had once been, where a man had slid her a sandwich without asking questions, where someone had seen her before she knew how to see herself. "Thank you," she whispered. No one answered. She didn't need them to. As Mara drove away, she understood something with a quiet certainty. She had been thrown away. At 14, with nothing. No safety net. No promises. No second chances. So she built herself. Piece by piece. Decision by decision. Scar by scar. She built herself into something useful. Something reliable. Something no one could discard again. Strength isn't born in comfort. It's forged when the world decides you don't matter, and you decide to prove it wrong. Most of the warriors who shape history will never have their names carved into stone. They won't be mentioned in speeches. They won't stand beneath spotlights. They move through the world quietly. They carry burdens most people will never see. They make decisions in seconds that echo for lifetimes. Mara Hale is one of those warriors. A quiet professional. A shadow among shadows. not driven by glory, not chasing recognition, simply answering the call when others are counting on someone they will never meet. Stories like hers remind us that courage is often silent, that sacrifice is usually unseen, and that the people who hold the line are rarely the ones asking to be noticed. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more FOB veteran stories. These stories keep the courage alive for generations to come.